Google, like my son's been telling me. Okay, here we are.
Oh.
And we have a seat. Today is March the 5th, 19. I was going to say my birthday's 1953. It is my birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
2011. And the place of this interview is 13300 Night Owl Lane. Right, I got it. Okay, in Calusa, in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. And I'm here with Mr. and Mrs. Ken and Liz Link. And who was born... Ken, when were you born?
18th of August, 1940.
Okay. Liz, do you mind sharing?
I have to share August 23, 1937.
Okay, and I just said what the current address is. And my name is Carlton Cartwright, and I will be conducting the interview as a member of the Children's Coalition Incorporated. This interview is part of the Veterans History Project sponsored by the Library of Congress, American Folklife Center. Okay, now, here we go. What were some of your strongest memories of your parents?
Well, my dad worked for Shell Oil Company, traveled a lot, so he was probably home just on the weekends.
Okay.
And my mother was in charge of the family and raised me and two younger brothers.
What did you dream of becoming when you grew up?
Oh, I had lots of dreams. And once I was going to be a veterinarian, but I gave that up when I had to castrate pigs as about a 13-year-old. Decided I didn't want to be a vet after that. My dad was an engineer, so I decided when I got to college I was going to be an engineer.
Okay.
I was kind of mechanical as a kid growing up.
Mm-hmm. Were you drafted or did you enlist into the military?
I went ROTC and got a commission on college graduation.
Why did you pick your service branch?
Well, when I went to college, ROTC Junior, they had the prettiest looking uniforms.
Okay. And was that Air Force?
Air Force.
Okay, right. Yeah, they did, didn't they? Okay, what kind of work were you doing at that time?
I had gone from high school to college.
Okay, you're a student.
Yeah.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about them?
Well, I got commissioned in New Brunswick, New Jersey at Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
Jumped in a car and drove down to James Conley Air Force Base in Waco, Texas, which is where I was going to go to Navigator School.
Mm-hmm.
And just checked in as a brand new second lieutenant, new to the service, with a bunch of other new guys who were there to learn how to navigate.
Okay. And what did that feel like? What was it like? Tell us about your boot camp, your training experiences, and
Well, it was a real adventure.
Mm-hmm.
As an engineer, I thought it was quite easy because navigation is nothing but thinking of like mathematical kind of stuff.
Right.
Speed and distance and time. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And you learn to cope with the winds blowing you this way or that way, faster or slower, and you just make sure the airplane gets to where you intend to go.
Right. Okay. What was the ethnic makeup of your camp, your base? Where were you stationed at after training, basic training, I guess, and tech school?
Undergraduate navigator training in Waco, Texas, James Conley Air Force Base.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember your instructors?
A couple of them, yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything to, what do you remember about them? And, well, you were an officer yourself, right?
Yeah,
okay.
right.
All right. So since you were an officer, what were your instructors like?
Well,
Was your training adequate? Was it harsh? How did you get through it?
well, I got through pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I just missed being in the top 10% of my graduating class. And as an incentive to do well in Navigator School, they gave you a top 10% of choice of all the available assignments.
Mm-hmm.
And I just missed that top 10% to have my pick of an assignment. And the other 90% were divided into 3 groups, 30% groups. The available assignments were divided into 30% groups. And a board of officers matched one to the other. Because what people getting their own choice left the least talented navigators to take the more demanding advanced navigator courses.
Right.
And this was not doing too well for the Air Force.
Okay.
And I go to church on Sunday and thank God because I fell into the top 30% group, but the assignment I really wanted was in the bottom 30% group. So I say to them, you get 3 choices. I made 2 choices. I said, give me this one that wasn't supposed to be mine as my first choice, and if you don't give me that one, I'll go to your advanced navigator school. And lo and behold, I got selected for one that supposedly wasn't available to me.
So you got what you wanted.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
And what was that?
It was to C-54s, which is the old DC-4 in the Philippines, Clark Air Force Base. 13th Air Force was headquartered at Clark, and we were supporting them, taking their people around. My organization went to Hong Kong every Sunday and Wednesday. They went to Taipei every Tuesday and Friday. Once a week or so we would go to Japan. Vietnam was just starting up, and we would go to Vietnam and Bangkok because they were thinking about what people imagined the war was going to come.
Right.
And on occasion we'd go down to Singapore, and it was an opportunity to travel.
Right. Okay.
And interesting places.
Mm-hmm. What year was this?
This was 1963.
Okay. All right. Which war did you serve in?
Vietnam.
Vietnam. Okay. Hold on a second. I need to just back up for a minute. Well, wait a minute. I did do that. I apologize. Let's see. No, everything's done. There we go. Fine. Just keep going. Right. And where exactly did you serve?
Well, like I say, I was in the Philippines, navigating C-54s, and a couple of B-57 squadrons at the old Canberra jet had been on nuclear alert in Korea and had stood down from there, and they were headed back to the States. And the first few airplanes actually got back to the States before somebody said, wait a minute, something's happening down in Vietnam. Let's take those airplanes and take them to Clark Air Force Base in case we ever want to use them.
Right.
So they arrived at Clark in about April or May of '64. The Navy did something in the Gulf of Tonkin on the 3rd of August '64.
Right.
The Air Force says, hey, the Navy can't have the only fun doing military things. So the Air Force decided they were going to go to Benoit with their B-57s on the 5th of August. But they did not have navigators for every back seat of the B-57s. So they walked around Clark Air Force Base, and if the navigator was walking around, bless you, my son, you're a B-57 navigator. Learn how to wear this jumpsuit and helmet. So we went to Benoit on the 5th of August, '64. And did absolutely nothing while we were over there.
Okay. All right. What rank were you when you got out of the military?
Captain.
Okay. All right. Let's see now. All right, and we already officially you were a navigator, correct?
Yep.
Did you see any combat?
I was in the combat area.
Okay.
I was not a fighter.
Okay.
Did not drop bombs, shoot guns. We would carry caskets and troops in and out. But no, I don't know that I was ever shot at.
Right. So I guess were there any casualties at all in your unit?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the 5th of August, when we were on our way into Benoit, the airplane next to me never did land that night.
Oh boy.
Now we had we had lost pressurization on the way into Benoit, and my pilot decided he didn't want to wait for his turn to land, so he went VFR, which is visual flight rules instead of instrument flight rules, and he landed. When he left the formation, our call sign was Delta 3. Delta 4 moved up to then become Delta 3. still flying our instrument flight rules. They never did land that night. Well, all they knew was Delta 3, something happened to it.
Right.
Not knowing that the real Delta 3 was on the ground drinking coffee and having donuts. And these two guys named Kucher and Castor, they're on the Vietnam Wall, first panel, 16 lines down.
Those are the guys that didn't make it?
They didn't make it that night.
Okay.
And there was some confusion as to whether I was one of those guys. They thought maybe it had turned around and gone back to the Philippines.
Right.
And all of my records had not moved from my organization to their organization. So in the middle of the night, they went down and started taking my records from where I was down to the bomb squadron and said, don't tell anybody, but we think you might have been shot down over there.
Right.
Not knowing I wasn't shot down, it was somebody else. So
Okay.
it was a mess.
You finally got it straightened out, though.
Yeah. But unfortunately, two guys are dead because...
Yeah. Well, that wasn't your fault, though.
No.
Yeah. Just the paperwork makes up after the fact. Okay, tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences. And you weren't a prisoner of war, were you?
No.
Okay.
No.
So what are a couple of memorable experiences that you had?
Okay. This B-57 experience occurred in '64. I got 1 month Vietnam credit. I left the Philippines in '66 and went to Dayton, Ohio in Air Force Systems Command. And in 1970, the project I was on in Dayton, Ohio was going to transfer to Patrick Air Force Base in Florida, and I wanted to go with my own project. But personnel realized I had not served my 1 year in Vietnam. So I got sick and tired of hearing it. Vulnerability for overseas assignment and rated specialties, request for transfer disapproved. Which meant I had to go get another 11 months in Vietnam until they would give me my personal desires to where I wanted to go.
Oh.
So I volunteered to go to Vietnam in a 123, which is the Bookie Bird. It's a Recip 130 cargo hauler.
C-130?
See, well, it's the baby brother to the C-130.
Gotcha.
And we went to Phan Rang Air Force Base in that airplane. Now that's the time they were Vietnamizing the 123s. They're going to give all the 123s to the Vietnamese Air Force because the Americans had decided they were going to leave Vietnam. Just leave the Vietnamese take care of themselves.
Okay.
So they actually selected me to go down to Saigon, Tan Son Nhut, and train 6 Vietnamese navigators in airdrop procedures from the 123.
Okay.
We went through a training program, practice drops, and then they decided these Vietnamese navigators needed a check ride. So there was 3 bundles on a 123. So we had 2 Vietnamese navigators and myself, and I said to these guys, okay, we're going to go out and drop, and whoever's the furthest away from the target is going to take the other 2 guys to lunch. And you're going to go first, second, and I'm going to go third. And the guy looks at me in the eye and says, no, that's not fair. The guy who goes first has to make his drop purely on how he interprets the smoke, the way it's blowing on the ground. And the guy who goes last can make corrections on his drop based upon the error from the first 2 drops. I said to myself, well, geez, these guys really understand this airdrop from 123, so I'll go first. So I called the guy on the ground who lit off the can of smoke. I said, I want you to be very careful and measure exactly where from the smoke this thing, because we got bets going up here. Anything within 50 feet was a bullseye. I mean, I put it down there around 47 feet. And knowing where the 47 feet was not by the smoke, the other guy threw it in there. He was like 20 feet, and the third guy threw it right on top of the smoke. So I took 2 guys off to lunch. I mean, I thought they knew what they were doing,
Right.
and they did better than I did that day.
Right.
The next day, I get 2 different guys
Yeah.
from the 6, and they tell me how we're going to do that. I took 2 more guys out to lunch that next day. Hey, for whatever reason, we never could get an airplane and the bundles for the last set of guys, and I moved on to another job, which was 7th Air Force support, so flying 118s. In fact, it was the American Embassy VC-118. Ellsworth Bunker was an ambassador to Vietnam. His wife, Carol A's, was the ambassador to Kathmandu, Nepal.
Okay.
And we were either taking him up there to see her or going up there to get her to bring her back into Vietnam for some function. And if we weren't going to Kathmandu, Nepal, we were going to Bangkok every day. And that's a tough way to be participating in war over there. Now, the Americans were phasing down. There wasn't a whole lot of Americans in the war at that time. They were just trying to train the Vietnamese. And quite frankly, if you have to serve in Vietnam, you might as well do it supporting the American embassy. I mean, I don't know how many people ever got to Kathmandu, Nepal,
Right.
or went to Bangkok on a regular basis every day in and day out.
Right.
And I actually had to take an airplane back to the States once for maintenance to Dothan, Alabama, 118, then go back to Vietnam and resume. So that was a very enjoyable part of my career.
Okay. Good. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Well, yeah.
For what? How did you get them?
Participating in aerial flight in a combat area.
Okay.
Get you the air medal
Right.
without being involved in combat.
Gotcha.
But the medal I most appreciated was from the Vietnamese Air Force, called the Air Honors Standard Medal, Air Honors Medal or something. It was a recognition by the Vietnamese Air Force for the work I had done training their Vietnamese navigators in the 123. And I felt really proud to be identified and be presented this medal.
Good. Good. Okay. Did you ever have anything to do with battle planning? I'm asking that because you are an officer.
Okay. Going back to 1963, or 1964, when the B-57s went to Benoit. In August of 63, in 64, we were supposed to go get the POL dumps up in Hanoi. So we spent all day long planning our routes up there, drawing maps, determining what the battle plan was going to be when we got to the POL dumps in Hanoi. Bombers were going to go in and blow holes in tanks. Machine guns were going to keep the people away from trying to put the fires out. And then some airplanes coming in with napalm to light it all up on fire. And then we were going to go home and get a good night's sleep and go get them the next day. When we showed up the next day, somebody canceled the whole mission. It wasn't fair for the American Air Force to be picking on the poor Vietnamese who were just, rice paddy infantry against the sophisticated American Air Force, and they canceled the whole damn thing.
Really?
And it wasn't until, maybe 3 or 5 years later that the 105s and the F4s went in to do the same job against the POL dumps. But now the North Vietnamese have radar-guided anti-aircraft and missiles, and it was very costly. So somehow the military knew how to win the military battle, but they weren't allowed to do that.
Gotcha. Okay. So you weren't wounded or anything, were you?
No.
Okay. You didn't sustain any injuries. Okay. While you were in the service, I think we're gonna have this is your part coming up now. How did you stay in touch with your family?
Well, in 64, my wife, not this lady, was with me in the Philippines.
Back up for 1 second. What years were you in the military?
I got commissioned in 1962. I was in the Philippines in 63 to 66. I was in Dayton, Ohio from 66 to 70. Back to Vietnam in 70, 71. Went to Hawaii in 71, where I met this lady, because my first wife didn't want to be married after she learned to live alone while I was in Vietnam, and preferred that I didn't come home and be her husband. So we got married in 72, and like she mentioned before, we got transferred from Hawaii to Kokomo, Indiana, and 1977, I hung up my uniform and came to Florida.
So how many years total were you in the military?
Okay. That's uniform military.
Oh,
Then in 1979, while I was in Florida, living in St. Petersburg, I get a call if I wanted a government job over at Martin Marietta in Orlando. It was from the Defense Logistics Agency, which is military defense supplying arms and goods to the military forces. It was a temporary job, and while I was working temporary there, Pratt & Whitney calls me up and offers me permanent employment for the United States Air Force as a civilian engineer. Well, you can't be passing up offers of permanent employment. So I said, thank you very much, Orlando, Martin Marietta. I'm going to go to Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio, and got a permanent job as an engineer at the plant here.
okay.
You were going to Palm Beach Gardens.
Okay, well, Pratt & Whitney was at the Gardens, but the contract branch of even Pratt & Whitney was in the RCA complex down in Palm Beach Gardens. And we lived in the garden. I could ride a bicycle to work and get back and forth more quickly than I could driving a car over
Wow.
there.
Okay.
And then when they transferred all that organization to this organization out here, then it was time for me to come out to Calusa, built the house, and it's her turn to commute back into town where she worked for Barnett Bank.
Gotcha. Okay. Back to the beginning. We got the range. So actually, it sounded like you 15 years. You were on active duty.
15 years uniform, and I wound up 15 years civilian.
Wow. Okay.
Retired with 30 years federal government service in the Department of Defense, Air Force.
Good for you. Okay. So anyway, from the beginning again, how did you stay in touch with your family while you were in the military?
Well, again, back in the 60s in the Philippines, my first wife was with me at Clark.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just come home every once in a while.
Okay.
Okay, then in 70, 71, letters, tapes, you were sending tapes back and forth. Once in a while, the ham operators would let you make a phone call, but that was kind of, because every time you got done speaking, you'd have to say over, then he would throw the switch, and then she could talk back to you. And we stayed in touch, but then the last couple of months I was over there, I didn't hear from her a whole lot because she was already planning to divorce me when I came home.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then after that, we never were separated too much, except for SAC alert tours where I was up the street on alert. She was home raising our son.
But the first wife, or
No, this one.
yeah.
No children with the first wife.
okay? So after you got married to Liz, you all were together
Yeah.
in Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
Hawaii for 3 years. Kokomo, Indiana for 3 years. And then I hung up my uniform. We came to Florida.
So you didn't have to worry about staying in touch because you were together.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. All right. And while you were in the military, what was the food like?
Hey, food was great. I mean, being an officer, but Thanksgiving dinners, Thanksgiving was a big meal at the chow hall.
Right.
And even when in Kokomo, Indiana, you and our son would come out and we would chow down at the Alert Chow facility because they cooked a meal to die for, I think.
Yeah, you were always on alert.
Well, a lot on alert.
Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, because he was the new guy. And people are so friendly to me.
The neighbors in town.
The
We
neighbors
did
in
not live
town.
on base.
Oh, okay.
They're
We lived
wonderful.
in town.
Right. So what was it like, Liz? What was your experience when you got married? What was your experience like?
Well, of course, Hawaii was wonderful. I went to the beach every day. Kokomo was very different, but our neighbors were wonderful. They helped me. He was gone every other week, I think, for a whole week to South Dakota or somewhere.
Well, we've been over
Yeah,
there.
and
Dakotas or
in the winter time, I never even left the house. It was so cold, and so but you get used to it.
And that's a girl from Zurich, Switzerland, who should be used to the cold,
No, I don't like cold.
but didn't like cold.
That's why
It
I'm
was
here.
actually It was actually in Hawaii, being warm, when I arrived in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I met him in Hawaii.
Okay. So she was serious about the weather.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's
yes.
understandable.
It was too cold in Zurich, and I still had my visa, and I said, where is it going to be warm? Oh, Hawaii would be wonderful. So I went to Hawaii and got a job, and that's how I met him.
Okay.
And then when it came time to go where we wanted to go, we came to South Florida
Right.
for the weather.
Right.
Because actually, Honolulu, Hawaii is half a world away from Zurich, Switzerland. It doesn't matter if you go east or west. And her family, only she and one sister ever left Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot easier to get back and forth to Switzerland from Florida than it was from Hawaii.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it's only what, 6-8 hours?
Yeah, something like 8
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely another 4. What? It's 12, at least 12 hours,
Oh,
if more.
Yeah, it's another 6-8 hours that way to Hawaii.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I loved Hawaii.
Right.
I really did.
Gotcha.
It's
Okay.
beautiful.
Any, you were working there. What did you do?
Oh, in Hawaii?
Yeah.
I worked for Honolulu Paper Company.
Okay.
It was a subsidiary of Boise Cascade.
Okay. And so you just kept your job while he was there in the military until it was time to leave?
Then after a while, I quit my job because then he would be home and I would be working, and so we decided, no, I quit my job. And
Okay.
we would go to the beach together.
And then she got pregnant.
Right. I was getting ready to
Yeah.
say you got
Oh yeah,
2 children?
not one.
One.
One boy.
Okay. All right. And I guess, well, he was with you all the time too.
Oh yes, that's right.
So, okay. All right. All right. Well, after the food question, the next question was, did you have plenty of supplies?
Oh, sure.
You always had everything you needed?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you feel any pressure or stress over that 30-year or especially the 15-year period? The first part.
My job in Hawaii was a bit difficult for me because my experience and background in the service was different than 95% of the other guys in the squadron who had all come out of Air Force, the Strategic Air Command. And that's really a different Air Force than the Air Force I was used to. And just trying to do things like they wanted them done was difficult for me because that just wasn't my experience. As an example, in flying, there's places called the Air Defense Identification Zone. You're supposed to report who you are, otherwise they think you may be an attacking bomber or something like that. But in and out of Hawaii, it very clearly says in the flying regulations, if you report here, and with an estimate here, crossing the ADIS, you do not have to report the ADIS. And they would flunk me on a flight check because I didn't report the ADIS. They said, why? Well, that's what we do. I said, where do you learn to do that? Well, that's just what we do. Because look here on how to fly in and out of Hawaii. It says you don't have to do it if you do this and this and this. And I've been doing that for years before I met up with them. And just trying to understand what they were all about, it was difficult.
Like learning another language, huh?
Yeah, like learning another language. And quite frankly, I hate to say this, but I think I had forgotten more about navigation than they knew, so it wasn't easy. And unfortunately, it was not easy on her, too. I mean, fighting these guys sometimes.
Stressful, huh?
Yeah.
Very stressful.
Okay. Was there anything special that you did for good luck?
Well, we took advantage of travel opportunities while we were in the Air Force.
Okay.
I would be on alert at Hickam. I'd have a bag packed at home. I'd find out that while I was out there, an airplane was coming through in destination Bangkok that had plenty of seats on it. We could get on, no sweat. I'd call her up and I'd say, hey, bring my bag. We're going to go to Bangkok tonight. And I'd call a friend of mine to come in and finish the last couple of hours of my tour. Mm-hmm. And the one trip we made was to Saigon, Hong Kong, Taipei, Seoul, Korea, and then came back home. What was that, 2 weeks or 10 days vacation out there? And then we went to Australia one time on military space available.
Right.
And she also took me to Switzerland, military space available for some of the flights, and a dirt cheap charter flight for some other parts of the flight.
Right.
Back in the olden days,
Right.
you could fly from Frankfurt, Germany to Los Angeles for $129.
Okay.
Charter.
Yeah.
Military.
Right. Cool. All right. How did you entertain yourselves? Sounds like you like to travel a lot, but
Yeah, but plus we owned our own homes off base,
uh-huh.
so you could paint it the color you wanted and put in shelves, or we enjoyed where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
If you're living in base quarters, you're like renting a property. You don't want to leave it too much different than the way you found it.
Oh, in Hawaii, they had a new condominium. So we would go to the beach a lot, go out at night, do things.
Were you on the Big Island? Is that where you were?
Oahu.
Honolulu.
Oahu.
Next to the Hilton Hawaiian.
Okay. Okay.
It was really neat.
That's where Hickam Air Force Base is. Out at
Oahu.
In
Oahu,
Waikiki. We lived
Okay.
in Waikiki.
Okay.
We were spoiled. Yeah, we were spoiled.
Okay, well, we figured out what you did for entertainment. I think we talked about what you did when you were on leave, and we talked about where did you travel while you were in the service. Did we leave anything out? Any place, destination?
Well, in between the Philippines and when I went back to Vietnam, when I was in Air Force Systems Command, that was a worldwide mission. I mean, I got down to South America, I got down to South Africa. I actually went around the world once. And even from Dayton, Ohio, we spent a lot of time in Hawaii because we supported the Western Test Range. We had 4 airplanes that would park in orbit in Kwajalein for missiles launched out of Vandenberg. And we would position ourselves where we could take a picture of them re-entering. And if they fired a missile out of Patrick Air Force Base, we'd be down at Ascension Island in the South Atlantic to photograph its re-entry.
Wow.
And it was very interesting work, very interesting.
He was spoiled.
Good job.
Good job. That's good. You enjoyed yourself. Okay. Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual event?
No?
Okay. All right. Pranks. Some of these questions, anyway. What were some of the pranks that you or others would pull? Like maybe back in basic training or something? I don't know.
Well, in the Philippines, early on, it's unfortunate, but the military, they didn't encourage drinking, but they sure made it easy to drink. I mean, happy hours at the club and discount liquor and parties all the time, and really, if you got drunk, they didn't care all that much.
Mm-hmm.
That was that organization, PACAF. Now, when you got into SAC, they did not tolerate getting drunk. I remember I had a pilot who came out of pilot training, and they used to do a thing called roof stomping. They climb up on somebody's roof and just stomp it while they were sleeping and drive my side. And he wanted to go roof stomp somebody in Kokomo, Indiana. And he said, leave me out of this, because believe me, they are not going to think that's the least bit funny. And it wasn't. It wasn't. And he got into trouble for that.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any photographs from your military days?
Sure.
Okay.
No, let me see if you got that. That one back there, the big one. Oh.
While she's doing that, what did you think of your fellow soldiers? You are an officer, so the question is, what do you think of officers and fellow soldiers? And did you keep a personal diary?
No, didn't keep a diary.
Right.
Depending on the organization you're in, the Air Force Systems Command, Dayton, Ohio, I made some very good friends there. Those friendships continue and last. And before that, in the Philippines, had some very good friends. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, they died of old age and cancer and
Whatever.
Here we are.
See what I got here. Oh, look at that.
That's a good one.
what's that one?
It's a photo of you.
Oh, that me?
You in the airplane.
climbing up the ladder there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's from ROTC days.
Or
Air
it's not
Force
from. Oh, I
summer.
don't have another
Nah.
one then. Do you have another one?
That'll work. I can sort of maybe just sit right there. Oh,
Now, this is not my typical military experience. Quite frankly, if I couldn't stand up and walk around inside of it, I didn't ever care to be in it. This airplane is the T-33 pilot training airplane, and obviously I'm crawling up to get into a jump, ejection seat under
Right.
a canopy.
Right.
This was not my favorite kind of flying.
okay. Okay.
My airplane is the favorite DC C-54, which is this
Big planes.
big planes.
Right.
Walk around inside, sit down in comfortable seats. Have
Right.
full kitchens
Right.
and stewards that would prepare your meals for you.
Right. Right.
Which is a lot of the 135s, which is the same as the Boeing 707.
Right. Okay. Okay. Do you remember? This is. I know that you did 15 years active, and then you did 15 years civilian. I think this is pertinent more to the active duty. This is. We're approaching closure. Do you recall the day that the service ended? I mean, I don't know if it mattered or not. You went from transitioned.
Yeah, well, I knew it was coming to an end.
Right.
And I was just waiting to go. And we had a pickup truck with a slide-in camper, and just came to Florida with no particular one place in destination
Well,
in
St.
mind.
Petersburg.
Well, St. Petersburg.
You went to law school in St. Petersburg.
And I applied for law school over there.
Okay.
And I got accepted to law school. But after a year in law school, I gave that up as a misadventure, because as an engineer, 2 and 2 was 4 yesterday, it's 4 today, you can bet money it's going to be 4 again tomorrow. That's not the way laws
Right.
think. And then I got invited to go back to government employment as an engineer, which I was
Okay.
very happy to do.
All right, so that sort of begins the answer of what did you do in the days and weeks afterwards? Did you work or go back to school? Was your education supported by the GI Bill? And did you make any close friends in service? We spoke about some of that. Did you continue any of those relationships? For how long? And did you join a veterans organization?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
say that's
I
like
still have many good friends, mainly from Air Force Systems Command experience in Dayton, Ohio.
Mhm.
Now, the pilots there were mostly graduates of the Air Force Test Pilot School.
Mhm.
So they were a rank above professionally and technically than the average pilot. And I really enjoyed knowing these people. As a matter of fact, the organization I was in, they probably had 15 pilots and 4 or 5 navigators. Of the 15 pilots, 5 of them became general officers later on in their career. So I was dealing with a class and rank of people that was better than average in the service. And I really enjoyed that, and I've maintained friendships with a bunch of those kind of people.
okay. Okay, so how long did you go to school for? You
After-
went. You said you went you went to law school
For 1 year.
1 year.
And then I got offered this job as a government engineer in Orlando, and I decided it's time to get back in, work for a retirement, have medical insurance, and have a regular job, and not be coming home and studying all the time and moaning and groaning because you didn't enjoy it.
Right. Did you use the GI Bill to do that?
Yes,
Yeah,
I did.
but I did not complete
Complete
it,
it, right.
and gave it up.
Okay.
Came back on the civilian duty.
Okay. So I think we already know what you did for a career after the war. Here's a question: did your military experience influence your thinking about war, or about the military in general?
People can be proud of the military, but about war, the military knows how to win wars.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, they're political wars. You got to, when you do something militarily, you got to worry about what the rest of the world is going to think about that, and it's sad. But like I say, because in August of '64, the military knew how to bomb POL dumps as effective military measure, but the politicians said, no, we can't afford to do that. And unfortunately, that's what's going on these days in Afghanistan, and we don't dare go into northern Africa, where we could probably be very effective if we wanted to be. But,
Okay. Let me see. If you're in a veterans organization, what kinds of activities does your post or association have? Do you attend reunions?
well, Chapter 25, Vietnam veterans, they meet every first Monday of the month. Now, Vietnam Veterans of America is mainly a Army enlisted organization as opposed to an officer other than Army organization. Because quite frankly, the infantrymen and the Marines were not treated very, very well when they returned from Vietnam. They were forgotten about. They wanted to forget about it. And it took 10 years from the end of the war before they started getting the recognition of what they had done. And Vietnam veterans realized what some of the problems are with the returning Iraqi and Afghani soldiers, and we don't want to happen to them.
Right.
What we know happened to us.
Okay.
But we're passing upon my military experience. But even as a civilian, it was a military experience because I was the government overseer on Pratt & Whitney's overhaul for the J-58 engine, which is on the SR-71 super spy plane. So I had 15 years of close association with the military because we were providing them, or Pratt & Whitney was providing them the engines necessary to fly their Air Force systems.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't like I got away from the military. And because of my military experience, I could work better with the civilians because I was air crew and we were providing engines for airplanes. And it just helped the rapport, and I think I did a good job.
Great. Okay. How did your service and experiences affect your life? Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in the interview?
Well, without the military experience, I don't think I would have gotten around to see as much of the world as I have. For sure, I wouldn't have met this lady over here.
Not in Hawaii.
And who knows if we ever would have met. But getting around and seeing other people and other nations and other ways of life, I find that very enjoyable.
Okay. Well, it seems like you. Sounds like you. I like to travel too. It sounds like you really enjoyed it, and that's good. Okay. Well, I just would like to thank you for sharing, and we'll be working on any paperwork, and I'll be getting you a copy of this.
Oh boy.
And let me stop.